Ok, el segundo verbo es un poco más simple en que va con la manera en que lo usamos en inglés. Okay, so we're using this verb the same way that we might use it in English. And so that makes it a little more straightforward when we use this going forward. That kind of is different from how we use gustar because that's a little different. Now, we have seen this verb before. We saw it in a different form. We saw aburrido, okay, which is a different form of this, which means boring. So we saw this in our school vocabulary, right, when we're talking about those classes that maybe we have some trouble staying awake in. Okay, hopefully no es la clase de español. Ojalá que no. Okay, entonces significa to bore or to be boring. Okay, so we're using the same principle we saw with gustar in that we need to make sure that we account for singular and we need to make sure we account for plural. And we're not going to see yo in this case. We're not going to say yo aburre la clase de español. Okay, that doesn't make sense. And in fact, if we think about it like in English, this becomes a little more straightforward. I'll give you an example. So let's say, me aburre la clase de inglés. Okay, that's a standard one that maybe we're a little more bored at, right? Especially if you don't like reading very much. Me aburre la clase de inglés. Now, what are we saying here? Are we saying I am boring? Are we saying that I bore Spanish class or English class in this case? No, obviously. What we're trying to say is just like we might say it in English, right? English bores me, right? Or English is boring to me. So that's what we're using here. Now, we want to make sure that we're doing this the same way we saw with gustar, in that this here we're talking about la clase, which is singular. And so if we want to talk about something that's plural, we need to make that change with our verb, right? And so let's give an example going back to our chapter 4 or chapter 5 vocabulary, right? Sports. Now let's say you are one of the people who think that sports are boring, which is fair, right? Some people just don't like it. So we might say, me aburre los deportes. And if you were to say this in front of a native speaker, they might be a little confused, right? Because this is plural. So what's the change we need to make to our verb? Instead of me aburre, which would be singular, just like here, what we need to do is we need to add an N, right? So we make that plural. Me aburren los deportes. Okay, and so that's how we make that change. If the thing is singular, then we do that. And if the thing is plural, then we do it in that ellos, ellas, ustedes form that makes it plural. Okay, so this one's a little more straightforward in how we use it, a lot more similar to how we might use it in English than gustar was.